Port Harcourt greeted her with its busy streets and the scent of diesel in the air. It was a city of oil, opportunity, and anonymity. Here, no one knew her name and no one knew her story. She rented a one-bedroom flat. The walls were thin, but the space was her own. She found a job in a local fashion shop, stitching clothes for clients who didn't ask questions. The hum of the sewing machine was a soothing distraction, a way to keep the memories at bay. Days blurred into weeks. The pain of leaving Tola dulled into distant ache, a wound that refused to fully heal but no longer bled openly. Then the nausea came, the morning spent being sick over the tiny bathroom sink, the exhaustion that sank into her bones, the missed periods. Fear returned, wrapping around her like a vice. She found a small clinic on a quiet street. The doctor was a very kind woman with gentle eyes. She ran her test and returned to her with a smile. "You are pregnant." Lola was shocked. Her world tilted. She pressed a hand on her belly, her vision blurring with tears. Tola's child. Her heart ached. The storm of grief, love, and fear she thought she had left in Lagos all returned. But as she wiped the tears away, a fierce determination rose within her. The life growing inside her was innocent, pure, and a piece of the love she had lost, a reason to keep going. She whispered to the baby, her voice shaking but firm, "I will take care of you, I promise." Port Harcourt was not the future she had dreamed of, but it was where she would start anew. Alone, afraid, but hopeful. She stitched together a life, for herself and for the child she would soon meet. 8 months later, Lola gave birth to a baby boy named Ademola, the crown of royalty. He had Tola's deep brown eyes and a smile that melted her heart. The moment she held him, she felt a surge of love and protectiveness. This little boy was her world now. Lola worked tirelessly, stitching dresses by day and rocking Ademola to sleep by night. Her skill with the needle was undeniable, and her designs quickly caught the attention of her boss, Madame Ozioma, the boutique owner. Seeing Lola's dedication and the challenges of single motherhood, Madame Ozioma made her an offer. "You are so good at what you do, Lola," she said kindly. "Bring Ademola to work with you. I'll help you with childcare when things get busy." Tears welled in Lola's eyes. "Thank you so much, Ma. You don't know what this means to me." With Ademola nearby, Lola could breathe a little easier. 4 years later, on a humid evening in Port Harcourt, Lola's world shook again. Ademola had developed a persistent cough. His forehead was blazing with fever, and his small body trembled with every breath. Lola panicked as she pressed a damp cloth on his forehead. "Please, Ademola, don't be sick," she whispered. She rushed him to the nearest hospital. As she stumbled through the entrance of St. Mark's Church Hospital, "Please," she begged the nurse at the reception desk. "He is burning up." The nurse took one look at Ademola and nodded. "We'll take good care of him. You can wait here." But Lola couldn't afford to wait. Her job at the boutique barely covered their rent, and missing another shift might mean losing her job. She had dresses to complete that were due to be delivered, and only her could do it. She kissed Ademola's forehead, whispering, "Mommy will be back soon. Be brave, okay?" Ademola nodded weakly, his eyes glazed with fever. She called one of the nurses she had met through her boss, Nurse Kunle, and begged him to look after Ademola, that she would be back soon. As Lola turned to leave, she glanced towards the hallway. A figure in a white coat was speaking to another nurse, his back turned to her. The broad shoulders, the confident stance, something about him sent a chill down her spine. Her heart stopped. Tola, if you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. The world spun around her. Memories of bruises, Threats and Mrs. Adeyemi's cold, cruel eyes surged through her mind. She panicked, her chest squeezing tight. She stumbled to the nurse's station, gripping the counter for support. Please, Kunle, please, don't let that doctor near my son. Nurse Kunle was surprised. Why? Are you sure? Yes, she gasped, tears streaming down her face. Please, just keep him away. The nurse nodded. Of course. Lola fled to the hospital, her heart hammering. The fear she thought she had left behind in Lagos was back, threatening to consume her. But right now, she had no choice. She had to trust the nurses to care for her son. While Lola struggled to regain her composure outside, Tola walked into Ademola's room, holding a clipboard. He was volunteering at St. Mark's Church Hospital twice a week, a way to give back to the community and escape the monotony of his official posting at the Niger Delta Oil Company Clinic. The sight of the small boy lying in bed tugged at his heart. Ademola's face was flushed with fever, his little chest rising and falling rapidly. Hey there, champ, Tola said softly, pulling up a stool beside him. I'm Dr. Tola. Let's see if I can make you feel better. Ademola's eyes fluttered open, glazed but curious. Hi, he whispered. Tola's heart clenched. There was something strikingly familiar about the boy's eyes, a depth, a warmth that he couldn't place. He brushed the feeling aside and smiled. You are strong, aren't you? Ademola gave a small nod. My mommy says so. Tola chuckled gently. I bet she's right. He examined Ademola carefully, his doctor's instinct taking over. The boy winced as Tola placed the stethoscope on his chest. It's okay, champ. You are doing great. Over the next few days, Tola continued to check on Ademola during his volunteer shifts. The boy's condition improved slowly, and Tola found himself drawn to the child. They shared jokes, talked about cartoons, and Ademola's laughter warmed something deep inside Tola. There was an unexplainable bond between them, like a thread pulling at Tola's heart, whispering that there was more to this little boy than he realized. Lola returned to the hospital each evening after work, carefully timing her visits to avoid running into Tola. Her heart ached every time she saw how happy Ademola was, talking about Dr. Tola and how kind he was. The irony twisted like a knife in her chest. He doesn't even know he's caring for his own son. But fear kept her silent. Fear of Mrs. Adeyemi. Fear of the past repeating itself. She told herself she could manage this delicate balancing act. She could keep the truth hidden, protect Ademola, and avoid Tola forever. Lola had become a master of avoidance. She knew Tola's schedule by heart, memorized the rotations, and timed her visits meticulously. Each step she took in the hospital was calculated. It was a game of survival, a desperate dance to keep her past hidden in the shadows. But fate, as cruel and relentless as ever, had other plans. One evening, she turned a corner in a haste, her mind somewhere else. Before she knew it, she collided with a solid chest. It was warm, it was familiar, and it was steady. Strong hands gripped her arms to keep her from falling. She looked up and her world shattered. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. Tola, she whispered, trembling like a glass about to break. His eyes widened, disbelief and confusion flashing like lightning across his face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then spoke. His voice low, rough, and edged with pain. Lola. They both kept quiet for a while. He took a step back. His breath was unsteady. You are here? After all this time? Lola's vision blurred, tears pooling in her eyes, threatening to spill. She couldn't talk. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear, just like before, but her legs wouldn't move. Why did you leave me? Tola's voice cracked. I thought you were... He stopped himself. I thought you were gone. Lola swallowed hard. She wanted to talk, but words did not come out. His eyes was filled with anger and hurt. After everything we shared, you just vanished. No explanation, no goodbye. She clenched her fist, nails biting into her palms, trying to keep her composure. But the memories surged. The threats, the bruises, the fear of Mrs. Adeyemi that had swallowed her. It's complicated, she managed to say. Tola's gaze sharpened. He looked towards the room where Ademola was. He had suspicion on his face. Why have you been leaving him by himself? His voice rose with frustration. Where do you always go? Where is your husband? He's too young to be left alone. Lola's heart twisted violently. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The lies she could have told, the excuses she could have given, all crumbled beneath the weight of the truth she couldn't yet reveal. I have to go, she stammered. She turned, her legs were shaky, but she managed to walk away. Tola couldn't shake the encounter. Lola's haunted eyes, the tremor in her voice, and then there was the boy with his eyes. Days passed, but the familiarity of the child's gaze tormented him. It was like staring into a mirror of his own childhood. The pieces didn't fit, but they were close, so close. One evening, as he finished his rounds, he noticed the boy sitting alone in the waiting room, his legs swinging beneath the chair. He was holding a crayon and drawing a picture of a doctor with a white coat. Tola knelt beside him. Hey, champ. Ademola looked up. Hi, Dr. Tola. Tola's heart squeezed. He forced a smile. Where is your dad? Ademola shrugged, his little fingers fidgeting. I don't have a dad. The words hit Tola like a punch. Who takes care of you? My mommy, Ademola said, and sometimes Uncle Kunle the nurse. A cold chill went down Tola's spine. It seems the puzzle pieces are fitting together. He clenched his fist to stop his hands from shaking. I need answers. Tola waited outside the hospital that evening. His heart was a storm of emotions. He was confused, he was angry, yet he was hopeful. When Lola finally arrived, her face was weary and her steps were slow. She froze at the sight of him. Tola, please, I can't. Is he mine? Tola asked, his eyes pleading and desperate for the truth. Lola couldn't believe what she was hearing. For a moment, she thought about a few things she could tell him, but she was done with lying. For a moment, everything stilled, the world holding its breath. Yes, she whispered. Tola staggered back, as if the ground underneath him was shifting. He was shocked, he was hurt, and he couldn't believe his ears. Why didn't you tell me? His voice cracked with raw betrayal. She looked away. I was protecting him and protecting you. From who? He demanded. She tried hard not to talk, but the truth could no longer be hidden. From your mother. Realization dawned on Tola. My mother? She did something, didn't she? Lola's silence screamed the answer he feared. Tola's eyes filled with anguish. The weight of his mother's cruelty, the lost years, the love they had been robbed of, crashed over him like a wave. He reached out a hand, but Lola stepped back in fear. I didn't know, he whispered, his voice breaking. Lola, I did not know. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if holding together the pieces of her shattered heart. Tears streamed down her face, and for the first time, Tola saw the depth of pain she had carried alone. And beneath it all, despite the fear, despite the hurt, love still flickered, fragile but alive. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. The following day, Tola was a storm of emotions, his mind battling between anger, grief, and disbelief. The weight of the truth pressed heavily on him. It was suffocating. His mother, the woman who had raised him, had also been the architect of his deepest heartbreak. He was sitting in the small staff room when a voice on the hospital intercom announced visiting hours. but it was distant noise to him. Suddenly, the door creaked open and a nurse peeped in. "Dr. Tola, your mother is here to see you." His heart dropped into his stomach. He stood and walked to the corridor. Mrs. Adeyemi stood there, regal as always. "Tola," she said, her voice smooth and sounded practiced. "I had a business at one of the oil sites nearby. I couldn't live without saying goodbye to my only son." Her words felt like poison wrapped in the silk of motherly concern. "Why are you really here?" A flicker of something flashed across her face. Guilt, perhaps? She quickly masked it. "I simply wanted to see you. Is that a crime?" Tola nodded towards the exit. "Let's talk outside." They walked in a tense silence through the hallway. Just as they reached the hospital doors, Lola entered, clutching Ademola's hand. Her eyes met Mrs. Adeyemi, and the world seemed to stop around them. Lola froze, her face drained of color, the memory of Mrs. Adeyemi's cruelty crashing down on her. Mrs. Adeyemi's eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. "You again?" Lola's hand trembled as she gripped Ademola tighter. Her breath became shallow, but she stood her ground, her eyes blazing with a mix of fear and defiance. Tola stepped between them. "Mom," he said, "what did you do?" Mrs. Adeyemi's composure wavered for the first time, and her voice lacked its usual conviction. I did what was best for you." Tola's eyes burned with fury. "Best for me? You destroyed everything. Did you know she was pregnant? Did you know she could have died because of what you did?" Mrs. Adeyemi's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I was grateful for this placement," Tola continued, his voice shaking with rage and pain. "It took me away from you, from your poison. If this is the kind of person you are, then you are dead to me." Mrs. Adeyemi's eyes widened, the words cutting deep, but Tola didn't falter. "Thank you for everything you did for me," he said. His voice was cold and resolute. "But I can take it from here. I have a son who needs me, a son you kept from me, and I have a woman I need to make things right with. I want to be a better parent to my son than you ever were to me." His mother's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but the years of pride and control held them back. She opened her mouth to speak, but Tola had already turned away. He faced Lola, his eyes raw with regret and sorrow. His voice softened, breaking under the weight of guilt. "Lola, I am so sorry. I did not know it was this bad. I did not know my mother would stoop this low." Lola's lips trembled and her eyes filled with tears. She glanced at Mrs. Adeyemi, seeing something she had never thought she would: remorse. The mighty, unyielding woman now looked small, haunted by the consequences of her actions. Mrs. Adeyemi's voice finally came, a broken whisper. "Can you forgive me?" Lola took a shaky breath, remembering all the pain of the past. She looked down at Ademola, his innocent eyes filled with confusion and curiosity. "For Ademola's sake," her voice trembling, "I can try." Tola knelt down in front of Ademola with tears in his eyes. His heart ached with both joy and sorrow of the years he had lost with his son. He reached out a hand. "Hey champ, I'm your daddy." Ademola's little face lighted up with wonder, and a pure, simple, and beautiful smile spread across his lips. Tola let out a shaky breath as he pulled Ademola into his arms, holding him tightly, as if he could make up for those lost years in that single embrace. Lola's heart lifted, the weight she had carried for so long finally beginning to ease. She watched the man she had loved, the father of her child, hold their son with a tenderness that spoke louder than an apology ever could. Tola looked up at her, his eyes still pleading, still full of love. "Lola, I want us to be a family. I want to make things right. Please, let me try." For the first time in years, she had hope. The scars were still there, the pain still lingering, but beneath it all, love remained. She was bruised, but not broken. She nodded with a tearful smile. "We'll try." And beneath the vast open skies of Port Harcourt, where the past and present collided, their new story began. Not perfect, not painless, but full of hope, healing, and the promise of the future they had once lost. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.